Welcome to the Mental Health Boot Camp podcast.
Woo-hoo.
This is the podcast where 4 psychotherapists, 3 of us from Canada, 1 of us from the United States, serve you cutting-edge mental health knowledge. I am Dr. Ryan Howes, a clinical psychologist from Pasadena, California.
And I'm Brooke Lewis, a registered clinical counselor from the Greater Vancouver area in Canada.
And I am Joanna Boyd, also a registered clinical counselor from the Vancouver area in Canada.
And I'm Chris Boyd, a psychotherapist from Coquitlam.
Coquitlam.
Oh, Coquitlam.
Was that actually your town of birth, Chris? Were you born there?
It is, yeah, born and raised. It is a suburb of Vancouver. Just trying to be.
Technically, you were born in New Westminster.
At the
That's true.
hospital?
Yes, and then you lived in Coquitlam.
Good point.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. And you, Joe? Same thing?
Yep.
All right. Okay, well, let's keep going. Brooke, where were you born? And then where did you
I was
live?
born and raised in Burnaby.
Burnaby.
Another
Burnaby.
suburb.
Yeah, another suburb of Vancouver. So Burnaby and Coquitlam are neighbors.
Okay. Very nice.
And you, Ryan?
I was born in Portland, Oregon. Lived there until 2nd grade. Then I moved to Bend, Oregon. Beautiful place. Sometimes I think I'm crazy for leaving. And I came down here to California for graduate school and I never left. So here's where I am, Southern California guy. Earthquakes, fires, all that good stuff.
How big is Bend?
Bend is big. Well, compared to when I lived there, it had been about 20,000 people by the time I graduated high school, and now it's over 100,000.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it's it just grew. It exploded. It's a great recreational town. In the winter, it's skiing and snowmobiling and all the winter sports. And summertime, it's a mountain biking, kayaking, hiking sort of mecca. So it's really outdoorsy. It's wonderful there. So yes, a lot of people moved from California to Bend, figuring that was a great spot. It was the prices were a little cheaper up there for a while. And then a lot of the people from Bend kind of resented that. But now Bend is filled with a lot of ex-Californians. So not much complaining going on. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. And I went the other direction. What do you know?
Mhm.
Yes, there's a lot of togetherness there. There's a lot of people in Bend now. Speaking of togetherness.
I was just going to say.
Good segue. Wow.
Thank you. So yes, just to recap from last week, we're doing a book club of sorts. We're going to all read a book and we're going to talk about it in a couple of weeks. Is that right? 2 weeks?
Two more.
2 more weeks. We'll talk about it on the 29th. The book is called Together. Vivek Murthy is the author, Surgeon General of the United States. And so far, I'm about almost a third of the way into it, I would say. And I'm really enjoying the book quite a lot.
That's good.
I'm not as far in, but I'm also enjoying it.
Yeah, I'm like on page 4, maybe. And I've stopped reading it to get my notepad so I can start taking notes already. So I'm sure we will have lots to say.
Yeah.
Chris, are you starting to read it yet?
I was curious where that notepad is. Do you have to go buy one or is it close by? For me, I haven't actually started. I'm trying to finish off a book by Jay Shetty, which is actually pretty good. Think Like a Monk. So I am basically done that. I like Ryan, I listened to my books, so I have like 3 minutes left on that one. So I'm going to start Together tomorrow. Or Togetherness?
Mm.
Yes.
We'll all be together in this.
Okay.
One of the things that I'm not very far in, but they kind of throw some statistic stuff at you. I don't know if Ryan and Brooke, well, maybe Brooke, if you're literally on page 4, you wouldn't have reached this part yet, but just talking about the loneliness and its impact on reducing one's lifespan. And they compared it to having it's the same as having 15 cigarettes a day.
Oh, crazy.
And then it has even a greater impact than obesity on lifespan. So it should be taken as seriously as some of these, alcohol, drugs, obesity, in terms of how it affects us. So I was like, holy smokes. Yeah. So anyways, a lot of key points that I'm very intrigued by and looking forward to reading more.
Yes. Yeah,
Mhm.
it's really, the origin of it is really neat too. I think I could tell a bit of this story without spoiling it for anybody. But when Dr. Murthy became the Surgeon General down here, which is kind of like our top doctor, kind of advising a lot of medical policy down here, he decided that what he wanted to do is go around and do like a speaking tour, a listening tour. So he spent a couple of months traveling around the United States, going to small towns, big towns, wherever, and listening to people talk about kind of what their major concerns were. And typically the Surgeon General is thinking about things like smoking or obesity or kind of these drug use, the real public health issues. But he said that as he was listening to people's stories, just a recurring theme was this loneliness that people were feeling. And that maybe it wasn't prominent. Maybe people were coming out saying, well, you know what, doctor, I'm really lonely. But instead what they would talk about is how I have this problem and there's no one there for me to talk to. Or, gosh, I just feel so alone sometimes that I turn to drinking instead, or other things that would just kind of be symptomatic of the loneliness that he was noticing. So he decided, you know what, this is kind of an epidemic. We need to do something about this. So the book is all about kind of what the effects of loneliness might be and how people might address it. And I'm really fascinated so far. There's a lot of, as there are with a lot of books kind of like this, there's a lot of overlaps. Some other names that we've already talked about kind of get mentioned in here. And so it's a nice book so far. So big fan. Cool. Together. Pick it up, folks. And then you'll be, if you read it along with us, as you can tell, Chris hasn't even started it yet. So
I'm not.
We got plenty of time. We got 2 weeks before the podcast. And as we have a very informed, note-filled discussion in a couple of weeks, you'll be right up to date with us. Maybe you could even send in any questions you'd like us to answer if you want our opinion about the book, I guess. You could throw in a question or two. Just shoot us an email at info@mentalhealthbootcamp.com.
Yeah. So do we have like a framework? Are we going to assess the book? Are we going to rate it on a scale of 0 to 10? I guess.
Yeah, Brooke was mentioning something about that, right?
Yeah, all those things.
Okay.
So what you liked or didn't like, would you recommend it? And if you were to, who would it be good for, practitioner or client or both, general public, like who would get something from the book? If there's any interesting pieces, was it easy to read, difficult to read, just general thoughts or opinions, or if anything that you found interesting or stuck out, takeaway points. And on a scale of 0 to 10, what do you think you would give the book? For my book club, we are doing, we do 0 to 10, but we're now kind of breaking it into 2 categories, like subjective and objective. So subjectively, did I like this book? Personally, did I subjectively enjoy it? And then objectively, how well was it written? That's that kind of piece to it.
Interesting. Okay.
So up to you how you want to do your rating scale, but yeah, very informal.
I don't want to be a downer for anybody, but you might be thinking, oh, wow, this might be an interesting time for you to have an ambush from Vivek Murthy, from Dr. Murthy to come and ambush us during this time and talk about his book. I want to let you guys know that's not happening.
If anyone knows him, let us know.
Oh, if anyone knows him, great. But he is the current acting Surgeon General of the United States. And also that means that he's in Washington, D.C. probably, and he's not going to jump on here at midnight on a Thursday, I don't think so. So we're not going to have that. Just don't mean to burst anyone's bubble, but we'll just talk about it instead.
Yeah.
It's good.
I don't know that anyone was thinking about that, but
We can always send him a tweet, you know?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. We'll
Yeah.
tweet the heck out of him. That's great. Totally.
Yeah.
That sounds fun.
Cool.
Cool.
I'm excited.
Yes. It's going to be fun. A little something different for us. So, shall we get to our topic for the night?
Yes, I'm curious.
Is it a topic that we know about? Or is
No,
it
Chris.
a sociological topic?
Oh, I see.
No, it's an ambush. We don't know the topic. What do you mean a sociological? What do you mean by
his
that,
topic,
Chris?
his topic last week.
Referring to the
Oh,
topic last
sorry.
week. Yeah. It was
Yeah,
quite the ambush there, just
more
reflecting on.
sociology than psychology.
Yes, we talked about toxic masculinity last week. Caught us off guard. We all wished we'd done a little more
Knew that
research
topic ahead of
beforehand.
time would have been real great.
Yes, it's all right. We live and learn. Hey, you know what? The whole idea with this ambush thing is sometimes you got to just think on your feet. Sometimes you got to admit that you don't know what you don't know, right? As therapists, right? When you're in the room, client brings something up you don't know about. You don't
You
want to fake
refer
it.
them.
You don't necessarily refer them. You say, you know what? I'm not so sure. Let me do some looking at that, and I'll come back to you with it. You know, whatever it might
Sure.
be.
Yeah.
That's
No, it
okay.
worked out well. Yeah, for sure.
Yes. This one, I don't know that we're going to have so much trouble with that. I get to be the ambusher tonight. Are you ready, everybody?
Mhm.
We are ready.
Okay. Here's the ambush.
Time.
Ambush time. Here it goes. On your mark, get set, go. Social anxiety. Why do we have it? What can we do about it? These are common questions that we have. Here's another little twist I want to throw in there. What is its relationship to shyness and introversion? How can we distinguish between social anxiety, shyness, and introversion? So social anxiety, why do we have it? What can we do about it? And how is it related to shyness and introversion?
Neat.
Topic.
A lot of people talk about social anxiety these days. So it's kind of it's not quite as pervasive as OCD and ADD and a lot of other things that people kind of toss around kind of just casually, but it's almost there. People talk about social anxiety a bit.
I agree. I think it's come up more and more,
Mm-hmm.
and definitely in my younger populations, social anxiety. They bring it up. They think they're socially anxious, and
Mm-hmm.
exploring that. So yeah, no, I agree with you. Just observationally, it seems to be on the rise.
It does seem to be on the rise, or at least in the common language. And also, by the way, a little bit timely here, because as things are starting to open up a little bit here in the States, people are mentioning this a bit more as well. Like, whoa, I'm scared to expose myself even potentially to any sort of virus, or I'm just kind of scared of being back in big group social situations and what that might mean. So yes, something we want to just talk about here. So social anxiety, what is it? Do you guys have any sort of ideas? And I think this is a good one where examples might be good as well. If you guys have any from your own life or your clinical work, what social anxiety might look like.
Well, as we have explored in the past, anxiety, I see it as the anticipation of harm and danger. So often it's associated with those what if thoughts that pop into our minds, and quite commonly catastrophizing as well. So thinking of the worst case scenario that may happen. Brooke mentioned that it tends to pop up with the younger population, and for good reason, because the emphasis is often on connection, social connections with friends, right? And you don't want to do anything that may jeopardize your ability to have those relationships. So it's very, very present in the minds of I think everybody, but especially with those younger clients that we see.
Yeah, kind of simply put, I would say it's kind of a fear in some ways of being in social settings or situations. or like Chris said, kind of thinking that that's going to be a danger to the individual, not necessarily an actual danger, but fearing being criticized or judged by people. There might be some difficulty talking with people, meeting new people. Yeah, that's kind of what jumps out to my mind for social anxiety. And it's to a point where, yeah, it might cause, a lot of discomfort and stress thinking about being in a social situation. And there's usually a lot of avoidance there, depending how bad it is for the individual.
Yeah. So it can vary, right? It could be
Mhm.
in with one or two individuals, or it could be going to the mall where there's crowds of people as well, right?
Mhm. Or differentiating crowds as well. I was talking about crowds today with one client. General crowds are fine. Like if you were to go to the P&E, so the P&E up here is like a annual, like a fair with lots of rides and different things that comes in and out, and is very popular. So there's lots of people there. And she would be okay with that. But if it was around her school, like if she went somewhere and there was a bunch of people of her age group that go to her school, that would generate a lot more anxiety.
Mhm.
Or if she went to a location where there was a lot of people of her age group, that would also generate anxiety. But mixed
Yeah.
age with lots of people would be fine. Right. So, but again, that echoes the fear of judgment from a peer group, and especially during a time of life when your whole life is centered around social connection.
Big time. Yeah,
Absolutely.
for sure.
It might be actually, this might be a good place to introduce those other questions to kind of distinguish between shyness, social anxiety, introversion, and social anxiety and shyness. If you don't mind, we could dive into that. I guess I'll start off, if you don't mind, and just say that like, speaking of shyness is certainly difficult for a lot of people. It's when it's hard to maybe get up the gumption to go up and speak to somebody, and maybe a little bit challenging to show up at a party, or to be the first one to speak up. But contrasting that with social anxiety is debilitating. It impairs your functioning. It's something that keeps you from going to the party, or keeps you from maybe going to school even, or from going to some important events at work, or something like that. So it's much more debilitating. You could say that shyness is a very light form, and it's just sort of, what someone might say, it's kind of part of who they are. They're shy. Maybe at some point they come out of their shell, they open up, and they become more confident. But social anxiety it's a disorder in our DSM for a reason, because it actually impairs people's functioning and ability to enjoy life, and to kind of pursue the issues in their life, the tasks of their life. Does that jibe with you guys?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. I was thinking like, feeling nervous or timid, or more, more reserved, like those types of descriptors kind of pop into my mind.
For shyness?
Shyness, yeah.
Yeah.
But I like, so it may lead to some avoidance per se, but of course not to the same extent or level as social anxiety.
Right.
Mhm.
Right.
The shy
Yes.
person is still going to go to the party, but they're going to be maybe sitting on the couch in the corner talking to one or two people, or listening to the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
A bit of a wallflower effect, right? But versus, social anxiety, chances are that person isn't at the party.
Nope.
Yeah, they might not be at the party, or the thought of going to the party could make them lose sleep, or have them shaking and nervous and short of breath. I mean, a true anxiety reaction. The shy person might need a little encouragement to walk through the door, but the socially anxious person is going to be terrified.
Exactly. And often they'll have a friend with them, and they'll be, attached at the hip to the friend.
Mm-hmm.
For safety and security if they are there. But yes, absolutely, it's very debilitating.
Yeah. So a shy person probably would not like being put on the spot. Like if you show up to a party and you're just, it's how they interact. I think they in a lot of ways want to be there. They want to, experience the gathering, right? But if someone's like, okay, let's play a game now, cranium or charades, that would probably be pretty intensive for a shy person. I'm assuming, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
And for a socially anxious person, they would leave.
It'd be impossible, sure. Yeah. Or might feel impossible, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, like there's that desire. I talk to teens, and one teen in particular, and she wants to be able to talk with people and go to school, right? But she stays at home, and all she thinks about is how, she'd be worried she'd humiliate herself or say something silly, or that she'd feel embarrassed, or someone would think badly of her. And it's just, you're almost taken over by these thoughts that usually aren't based on, sometimes are not based on rational things, or it might be one situation happened to them and now it's kind of spun into something that they can't really control.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes.
It's definitely one of the most common anxiety disorders, I think. Is it not?
I don't know the stats on that, but I would imagine so, other than like generalized anxiety. I think it's more common than an OCD, or
Wouldn't the most common one be phobia?
perhaps.
Wouldn't Yeah, no, I don't think it's the most common. I think it's one of the most common. And in some cases, this would almost be like a social phobia in some ways. But anyways.
Yeah. I was going to say that I was actually a very shy person in elementary school and first year of high school. Remember being in those, going to high school, that transition was very difficult and challenging at times. So again, trying to avoid attention, fly under the radar. The idea of a class presentation was pretty intensive and excruciating, right? Never got to the point where I was avoiding school completely, of course, but it was just, I got very savvy in terms of who I interacted with and how I kind of navigated through some of those awkward situations.
Yeah. Well, thanks for that, Chris. And I guess as we get to what can a person do about things, maybe we'll hear the other part of the story where we hear how you became the ebullient extrovert that you are today. The gregarious.
That makes me think it's, and I think Ryan, you mentioned to kind of differentiate with introversion as well.
Yeah.
Because I think shyness and introversion are a bit different, as they are from social anxiety. When I think of introversion for myself, I feel like I'm partly both extroverted and introverted. I think of needing time to myself to kind of, I think of extroverts as liking to be around people and getting energized from being around people and really liking to socialize. And I think of introverts as they might be able to do that to some capacity, but they also need some solo time, or it's not as, they don't really seek that for energizing themselves, like the social situation. I don't know, what you guys think in terms of that.
Well,
I think it's also not just people, like if you're around people or not, but it's also, my understanding was the energy like from the room or being out, like environments in general, like external sources. So introverts might be or more will replenish from internal sources, and extroverts will replenish from external sources.
I like that.
Including people, right? Like an introvert was going to be more compelled to be like, you know what, no, I just want to stay home and hunker down in my room and read or do those things. An extrovert after a busy week might be like, I need to go for a walk. I need to go to the park. I need to get out. I need to move around. Like I need other environments. Yeah. Right. I think that's part of it.
Let me expand on that a little bit and say that as far as the science of this is concerned, introversion is a personality trait. It's just something that we're kind of born with, and it's not something to be treated. It's not something to be, worked on or something like that. Whereas shyness to some degree and social anxiety to a much greater degree are considered to be problematic and something that people can and will work on, or can and do work on at times to to help them kind of overcome it. No one needs to overcome introversion, right?
Exactly.
Right. But if you're if you are a new kid in school and you want to make friends, but you're shy, that's something you want to work on trying to, grow past and, boost yourself up. If you're someone who needs to interact with school or work or society in general, and you have social anxiety, that can be very debilitating and get in the way. And you certainly need to, it can help you to work on that. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But introversion it's a personality trait. Introversion, extroversion. It's just kind of, as you were saying before, it's commonly understood. It's like, where do you get your batteries charged? Are your batteries charged when you're alone or with a small group of people or very, small group of familiar people, something like that? Great. If it's more that if you're the type where you go to the party and you have such a great time and it takes you, it takes you a long time to wind down because you're just like so amped up from being around all those people, probably more on the extrovert side, right? Because you've just been so filled up with all that social interaction.
Yeah.
And it's not a binary black or white thing. It's a spectrum. People in the middle, it popping up more and more these days is the term ambivert. So people who are kind of right in the middle of introvert, extrovert. And that it can be circumstantial as well. I love having parties. I love being at parties. I love all of that stuff too. And I also love my downtime. So I think I'm squarely in the ambivert category there.
Yeah, I think I would be too. And a lot of people I connect with tend to be in that middle range, in the ambivert status.
Yeah. So I hope that kind of helps clarify that. Shyness is a mild version of social anxiety, which is extreme and really requires treatment, and impairs functioning in life. And introversion is not a disorder. It's not a problem. It's just, actually, it's a problem if you are an introvert living in an extroverted world or in an extroverted career or extroverted family. Then it can cause a lot of distress for you if there are extrovert expectations of you while you're actually introvert personality. That could be problematic. And I've definitely seen clients and some friends where that's been the case. Like an introvert in a very kind of gregarious marketing or sales job, that's hard. It's hard for them to do.
Yeah.
They're going to burn out pretty quickly because that's so relational and social,
Yeah.
Whereas I've heard that when they're hiring air traffic controllers, they actually like try to screen for people to make sure they're not getting extroverts in that place. They want introverts, want people who are just going to focus and not be gabby and social too much, because they want to just focus on the task at hand.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so getting back to, so we kind of defined what social anxiety is. We probably have some more examples of that coming along, but gosh, what can we do about it? I guess, what can we do about it on a non-clinical level? Like, if one of our listeners is listening right now and saying, gosh, I feel like maybe I have social anxiety, or I have a loved one who I think deals with social anxiety. Is there anything that can be done sort of immediately there? And then what do we do when someone with social anxiety comes to treatment? How do we address that in a psychotherapy setting?
Yeah. When it comes to shyness as well as social anxiety, I think one of the underlying messages is, trying to calm the body and shift the mind and kind of step into that discomfort, right? So we've talked a lot about ways to maybe calm ourselves down and maybe develop a mindset that can help us do what we need to do to have that balance in our lives. I think the culprit, or one of the biggest ways in which we cope with shyness and social anxiety especially, is avoidance. So avoidance can give us a temporary relief, which is nice, but of course it can probably make it a little tougher to do it the next time. So the more we avoid, the tougher it often becomes to have that balance, or to face those fears. Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah. Every time you avoid, you're reinforcing the idea that avoidance is fine. Like it's okay.
The way to go. Yeah.
Yeah. That way I don't have to feel all those feelings I imagine I would feel in that situation, right? Sure.
Yeah, for sure. So calm the body. I think we've talked about some of those techniques. But I was talking to someone today about ways to kind of refocus the mind. And, mindfulness is so great. Noticing the thoughts non-judgmentally with curiosity and trying to focus back on the moment. Or a second way would be making that pivot to positivity. So maybe rehearsing a mantra or a quote, or thinking of something you're grateful for can kind of shift that energy within your mind and body. Or a cognitive behavioral technique, which we can explore too, is reframing, or kind of challenging those thoughts. So not going down the rabbit hole and spiraling here. It's more of a quick reframe, and again, trying to step into that discomfort.
Step in. Okay, people talk about that. That's a buzzword, buzz phrase that we talk about in psychotherapy a lot. Step into that discomfort, or the only way through is through. I don't know, what does the saying there? But you got to go through it. So, I mean, you've got someone who feels anxious. How are you saying go feel anxious? Go head first into your anxiety? That's a scary proposition, isn't it?
I think that would be flooding, wouldn't it? If it would be
Yeah.
a little too intensive.
Sure.
I think that person would probably want to, like Chris mentioned, try to work on some of those relaxation techniques, their coping techniques, to start to, or to learn about anxiety and the body and what's happening for themselves. Get to know it a bit more, notice that it doesn't need to be this big scary thing. Work on relaxing themselves, calming the body, and then, if they feel like they have some good tools in their toolkit, they can maybe gradually, face some of the things that are anxiety provoking to them. And then notice that when the things happen in their bodies, that they're like, oh, right, I know what's going on here. I don't need to be afraid of it. I'm going to learn how to sit with this discomfort and overcome it, or know that, hey, that wasn't worst case scenario. So I wouldn't say go flood, like jump right into it, but maybe get some tools first.
Yeah.
Like if you're going to the grocery store, go to a checkout with a teller instead of an automatic checkout. And have like a little conversation with the person about, like, the small talk, the dreaded small talk.
Or
opposed to going to a party.
Okay, you're talking about like the whole
hierarchy.
Idea of systematic desensitization of like you're systematically going from no contact to very small, big kind of superficial contact to something that may be a little more intense, right?
Yeah.
While all the while you're kind of keeping in mind your relaxation exercises and all of that, right?
Yeah. Well, I think, and I'm pretty sure we've talked about this a few times, but with anxiety, your perception of the anxiety is often a big part of it. So if you view anxiety as scary and bad, and then that's not going to be helpful for you. But if you understand anxiety is just a physiological response, and it's just anxiety is trying to sell you a bunch of BS about why this situation is dangerous when it's not really true, we can put that in perspective. We don't have to be fearful of it, and you're not going to implode. It'll be okay. You move forward, you can get through that. And as long as you can build some confidence in it, then you're going to be more willing to do it again, hopefully.
Yeah. Yes, it's true. Anxiety will always err on the side of caution unless you give it a reason not to, right? Just trying to keep you safe. It just does too good of a job sometimes.
Yeah.
So yeah, I like that gradual approach, but also what Joanna was saying too about the understanding how your body works, right? You can notice the automatic thoughts and the sensations and the feelings, and you're like, oh wow, and you observe it instead of riding that roller coaster. Then how powerful can that be? You can respond to it instead of just reacting constantly to these triggers.
Or buying into it, generally buying into it, right?
Yeah, taking the
bait.
bait.
You don't have to. Yeah, you can observe it instead and have that space.
Yeah.
I'm going to make an appeal for another layer to this as well, which is to ask the question why do I feel this way, right? Where does this come from? So when people talk about, let's say a client came in for the first time saying, gosh, I feel all the social anxiety, one of the questions I'm going to ask is, how long has this been going on? When was the first time you felt this way, right? Maybe it's just been going on for a couple months, and then I want to figure out, well, what happened a couple months ago? What happened to kind of set this whole process off in the first place? Did something horrible happen? Were you humiliated at a party and suddenly, now all parties seem scary? That's the way some sort of phobic reactions happen or originate. And even if it's been a long-term thing, I'd want to check out, well, gosh, do you remember a time when you didn't have this? Was there ever a time in your life when you weren't feeling socially anxious, or a setting in your life when you weren't socially anxious? Because that's very interesting information too, because gosh, maybe it's only in a school setting or in a work setting or in a family setting or friendship or whatever it might be. Then we want to figure out, okay, how can we use that information to help us make these scary spaces not so scary. And then the most kind of the deeper work I might do is say, okay, well, if you're feeling scary now, what does this remind you of, maybe from your childhood even? And there are some times when people will say, yeah, well, I remember being on the playground and always being picked last for the team, and so that was humiliating. And I feel that same way whenever I go to happy hour or whatever it might be, and those sorts of connections that people can make from their past to the present can sometimes unlock something for them. And they feel like, oh, okay, I'm not on the playground. I'm not in second grade. I'm not on the playground anymore. I don't have to feel that way any longer. And it can really ease their stress at times. So that's just in some cases, right? Kind of working with people in that way.
Yeah. No, I agree. There's one of the therapists we work with, she compared anxiety to like a vine. Like, so if you were to have like a vine in your yard, so we have like an invasive vine up here called morning glory. I'm sure other places would find it beautiful. They're like nice green leaves and these big open flowers, but very aggressive. Like, this thing's going to grow everywhere. And so she compared anxiety to like morning glory. So I'm sure somewhere back there it was planted, it rooted. But then over time, especially if it's not dealt with, and then you're doing all the avoidance or these different like safety behaviors, that vine is going to grow, and it's going to start touching all these different areas or circumstances in your life, and it's going to start to affect more things. So it's really interesting, right, to see what it ends up taking over. But if it hasn't been cared for, it might have started as something like that, or maybe somebody was in the mild form a bit more shy, and then there was some avoidance for behaviors, and then that avoidance actually turned into anxiety, and that anxiety is now bigger, and it just took over, right? So we want to trim that back.
Yeah, I like that metaphor a lot. It's like that, like an old saying, if your reaction does not fit the situation, it's probably stemming from the past. Stemming.
Oh, there we go. I think down here we have bougainvillea, which is a beautiful, beautiful plant that just destroys things in its process. I mean, it's gorgeous to look at, but you let it go for a few years and it will suffocate every other plant in its way, and it will I've seen it destroy fences. I mean, it's a massively destructive plant, kind of like anxiety can be. So I think that's a great metaphor, bro.
Yeah.
Right? Where it generalizes out, and then like, okay.
Yes.
At the same time too, there are a few other factors that might be happening here, like genetics, right? Say 30 to 40% of the way that we feel might be impacted by genetics. So
might want to look up the family tree there and see if there's any other.
Joanna and I, our Aunt Roz, I think she said years ago, she's like, us, or my mom's maiden name's Casey. Us Casey's, we don't do well with anxiety. We're an anxious bunch, or a stressed bunch, right? They all work, most of them work in insurance, which doesn't help the cause, hence why they're trying to get out of it. But I think there's some truth to that too, right? you may actually not have a lot of these challenges in the past, but you may be more prone to feeling those sensations due to genetics.
Mm.
That's a great
And
point.
social learning as well. I know this one's more a phobia, but I'm scared of spiders, and I'm pretty certain that's because my mom is scared of spiders. And I've seen her vividly. I can vividly remember as a young child seeing her freak out in regards to spiders.
Mhm. Well,
And I think
yeah.
I've learned that behavior from her, right? So if your parent is socially anxious,
Mhm.
then not saying that's the root cause, but it could be a contributing factor.
Certainly. I've got to say, just from a year and a month of being locked down, in the last few weeks, I've been a few places where there are large groups of people. I mean, because now things in California are opening up a bit more. There's restaurants, people are eating indoors, this sort of thing. And we actually walked through the mall to get something. There's a mall nearby here, and I just saw a whole lot of people. And I wasn't scared so much as it was just startling to my system to see so many human beings kind of in the same place together.
Mhm.
And if that, and I don't think I suffer from much social anxiety or even much shyness, but if I'm feeling that after a year of this, like, whoa, I kind of feel this visceral sense of, wow, that's a lot of people. I can only imagine someone with social anxiety after being locked down for a year. What is that going to be like? So
It's going to be tough.
Yeah.
be
Really
careful.
tough. Yeah, and I'm sure maybe we'll talk about this in a different podcast, but also persons with health anxiety.
Yeah,
Whew. Yeah.
Can you
sure.
elaborate? Like
Health
anxiety
anxiety?
about getting sick?
Uh-huh. Yeah. So if they're going to be out in public, it might not necessarily be that there's people like worrying about fear of judgment or embarrassment or
Yeah.
criticism, but the fear might actually be more centered around like germs
Yeah.
and getting sick and ailments.
Totally.
So,
Mhm.
Sure.
especially after all the messaging that we've got in the past 14 months.
Yes.
One other thing I want to point to, we talked genetics, talked about the past, talked about
Environment,
environment,
like
yeah,
social
Mhm.
environment. Mhm.
yeah, social environment. To you trauma specialists out there, could past trauma have anything to do? Could that create social anxiety or something that looks like social anxiety?
I think you already answered that as yes in your own example.
Yeah. Childhood
Because,
stuff or
yeah, I'm like,
Yeah.
Ryan's turning
Yeah.
into a trauma therapist.
Well, more of just a depth there, but yeah, certainly things from your past. But like I'm thinking of like overlap with PTSD, that sort of thing. Is there? I think that also creates that same sensation.
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah,
I
for
think
sure.
the sensations would be the same for sure. It might not have the same triggers, for lack of a better word.
And I think the purpose is different, sort of.
Like anxiety, whether it's about general anxiety or social anxiety, like, usually feels quite similar. It's just depending what it's about or what kind of sets it off. So I think
what that
PTSD,
voice is saying, right?
Yeah.
Like, are they judging me versus am I safe?
Or just uncertainty, things like that. So
I think the more we learn about trauma, the more we realize it's often at the root of many forms of anxiety.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or stuff being stored in the body, after high stress situations, or I think for sure it all plays together.
Stored in the body, Joe?
Yeah. I think there's a good book by Bessel van der Kolk. I think, is it Body Keeps Score? Body Keeps a Score. He's a very big trauma, big trauma guy in our field. And just talking about when we go through traumatic experiences, if our body remembers, essentially, if we're not able to process it or process the trauma as much as we need to, our bodies can get, what would you call it? I don't want to use the word triggered again, but get set off, for certain sensations can be set off from future situations that either make us feel like we're back in that danger again, or remind us of that danger. And sometimes we're not even cognitively aware of what's going on there. It feels like we're reliving it, even though we're not. So someone who was bullied, I hear a lot from my teens. Middle school is a tough time. Grade 6, 7 up here in Canada, like whether it's bullying and that, just some of them are just so impacted. And so any type of social situations that are uncomfortable, it's all of a sudden they're flooded by kind of memories, or their body feels like they're back in really awful times being bullied. So.
Yeah.
Yes, that sounds pretty miserable. If you're imagine carrying that to a birthday party, you know?
Yeah.
That's just a lot.
Evolutionarily as well, just kind of switching, adding another element in here. We do have a negativity bias, right? Like, so how I'm going to loop this in, there was like, do you guys remember the study with the happy faces and sad face? Right? So there was, they were timing reaction times, and there would be a screen and there would be a bunch of happy faces and one sad face, and then and another screen would have a bunch of sad faces with one happy face. So when you found whichever the face was, happy or sad, you would click the button, the one face, and they timed the reaction time, and people were exponentially faster, significantly faster at finding the sad face and the happy faces. Just finding the happy face and the sad faces.
Yes.
So it's kind of like, what is that about? And then taking a look at that, of that are in an evolutionary perspective, we're constantly scanning the environment. We're tuned to this. We're maybe too good at this, of scanning the environment, trying to find
the negatives,
anything about danger, right? And so if you're looking at a crowd and then there's someone who's scowly or sad, then that's an indicator that there might be danger.
Yeah.
So with social anxiety, I'm curious, perhaps those cues might be a bit stronger than what they really need to be. They're doing a disservice at that time, right?
Yeah. That's an excellent point. Evolutionary perspective. Have you ever noticed when you're walking down the street, you can always pick out the person who's staring at you or looking at you out of a crowd? Like you, or maybe it's just me, I don't know. You can always notice a person if someone's looking at you or staring at you. And I think that stems from that evolutionary piece as well. It made a heck of a lot of sense to notice the eyes that are the eyes of predators that are looking at you or lurking at you.
Yeah.
No one's looking
Get caught looking at people before. Like if you're just kind of zoned out, or you're looking at someone or curious, and all of a sudden they look at you, you're like, oh, like how did they know? Or like they just anyways, they might be glancing and they just notice, and you're like, dang it.
That's what Joanna does on her lunch break. She goes out there and stares at people.
People staring. My goodness.
I do. Yeah. No, I don't. But just to clarify.
I mean, I actually, I'll admit to being a people watcher in general. Like and in big social situations, sitting at a concert waiting for the band to come on, or being at a sporting event, or sitting at the mall or something like that. I love to just sit and just kind of watch people and just see what they're all about. It's kind of
the airport.
Fun. Oh, the airport. That's a big people watcher.
That's all you can do.
That's right. That's right. And maybe that's something for a socially anxious person to learn from as well, as we're talking about these different things about self-soothing and all of that. I guess when I think of someone who's shy, maybe having a hard time connecting with other people, some things might be about this, just observe for a while, just hang back and watch how people interact with each other, and maybe pick up some tips from that. Show curiosity about the other person. Maybe it's a little scary for you to talk about yourself. Maybe you can ask them about themselves and just be curious and try to, see if you can find some common ground, some connection there. We talked about some of these things in the How to Make Friends podcast from many months ago. So, but yeah, I think there are some ways that people can kind of on the milder side of this social anxiety spectrum here, that people can kind of find ways to feel more comfortable and take smaller risks, like Brooke was talking about. Maybe talk to the checker at the store before really jumping into the full deep social situations.
And normalizing, there's always going to be some sense of uncertainty, right? It's going to feel like a bit of a risk.
Sure.
And to know, like, I think that's the kind of the sitting with the discomfort. Like, you're going to probably feel a bit of it, but that doesn't need to be a bad thing. Like, if you're waiting to feel super comfortable before going to talk to people, you're probably not going to feel that way.
It's true.
But how much of it can you handle? And you can probably handle more than you think.
Yeah. And also reminding yourself that everyone has these insecurities about themselves. And usually people are so caught up with their own insecurities, not really focusing on yours. And if somehow someone is judging you, I guarantee you this is way more about them than this is about you. But we'll let that play out. That's their issue, right?
So true.
It's like, we've used a lot of classroom or school examples here, but when you walk in late to class and you're like, oh my gosh, everyone's looking at me, you feel so insecure and vulnerable. But we've all seen other people walk in. You never really notice them. You don't really focus on them. You don't.
Yeah.
Yeah. So trying to confront some of those thoughts that pop into our minds.
So very true. Guys, this was socially wonderful tonight. Thank you for coming together with all of us and sharing your thoughts. I hope that this helps us to feel less lonely in this world. All right, now I'm just tying together this topic with our book club topic. Rush Out, Run, Don't Walk, Get Together by Vivek Murthy. And join us in our book club in a couple of weeks. Wow, I got two copies here. If you're watching the YouTube, they're both holding up copies. It's great. But that's it for today. That's all we got. Please like and subscribe. No, really. Like I say that all the time, but
like us.
Please give us a like, give us a subscribe. It helps other people find us, and we love to expand this podcast. So please do like, please do subscribe. Apple, Google, Podbean, Audible, Spotify, or YouTube. Send your questions or questions about the book to info@mentalhealthbootcamp.com. Visit us on Facebook or Instagram. Tell a friend or two. Make it your conversation starter. If you're opening up a conversation with somebody, be like, hey, have you ever read the book Together or listened to the Mental Health Bootcamp podcast? You really should give that a try. Then the conversation will just flow from there. Anyway, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thanks, everyone.
Say good
Bye,
night.
everybody.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.